So, I was going to start with a quote that I think many of you may have heard before, but it's really relevant to what we're discussing tonight and why we're discussing it. So, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than an end of capitalism. Sadly, I think there's a lot of truth to this, whether it's through social media or films and television, through countless academics and politicians. We've had it explained to us countless times and in countless ways how the world might end. But very rarely, if at all, have we had it explained to us in practical terms how socialism can save the world and what a socialist Britain will actually look like. So let's clarify our vision of what is the only viable alternative to capitalism and the only socio-economic system that can solve the existential crises that we face. None of us have experienced socialism. Therefore, it's hard to imagine what a society based on mutual cooperation looks like, where we have genuine democracy, not the facade of democracy we have in Britain, which is in fact a dictatorship of the rich. Currently, the most significant decisions are made by people we've never heard of or voted for with zero accountability, and their decisions are based upon the economic impetus of the global free market, which has no conscious plan or desire. It's anarchic, with no concern for human life. Instead, profit and growth is prioritized and incentivized over everything. This is why the world looks the way it does. And rather than this race to the bottom that's incentivized under capitalism, a planned socialist economy will be a race to the top for all. So I think some people imagine that if we have a socialist revolution, you'll go into your local town or city the next day and everything will look completely different. None of it will be familiar. Whereas in reality, we'll still have the same infrastructure, the same housing, the same businesses for quite some time. It'll be a gradual process of upgrading and improving what we have. We're not saying, come the revolution, let's bulldoze all the local McDonald's and Tesco's. Rather, what we're saying is big businesses and essential goods and services should be in control and under the ownership of the public as a whole, nationalized. It's part of a planned economy. So, for example, if we nationalize McDonald's, I think what we'll decide to do with it, in fact, I'm very confident, is we'll decide, right, we can do this much better. Let's have more affordable food and let's make it way healthier. Because at the moment, it doesn't make sense for it to be selling poison just so a few people can live in luxury. This is the reality. But convenient fast food makes sense. Let's use that for much better purposes. The same goes for your local Tesco. You know, Supermarkets are a good idea, but not supermarkets that are based upon exploitation. Or Amazon, this incredible distribution network that it has, we can put this to far better use. And then your social media platforms, your Instagram, your Facebook, Twitter, etc. What's wrong with them today is that they're run in the interests of a tiny minority, and it's in their interests to spread division and hate, to manipulate us, to spread lies, to get us to buy pointless shit we don't need. If this was under the control of the working class, I suspect what we'd do is we'd want social media to serve our interests. And that means making it so that, it's easy to collaborate with people all around the world, that it's used for building solidarity, for cooperation, for compassion. This is the potential of the technology under capitalism if we unleash that potential through a planned economy. So our aim is not to destroy the advancements of capitalism, but to unleash the enormous human potential which capitalism stifles, limits, and destroys. So, for example, let's say we nationalize McDonald's. We might still say it makes sense to have a manager and a regional manager, but the difference is at the moment, managers are beholden to their shareholders. But if McDonald's is nationalized, then the managers will be beholden to us and our interests. And this will be ensured in the workplace itself, where people will have regular elections where they decide who's the best person to be a manager with the right to recall if for whatever reason we can do better. And if you have complete transparency, which we must have, i.e., all the books are open and there's no special privilege, then managers will act like any other employee and they'll serve our interests. Hierarchy is necessary in certain workplaces. It only takes on a really predatory form under capitalism. Under socialism, hierarchy would be about liberating and improve the conditions for all and really, genuinely serve our interests and be accountable and recallable. So yeah, we've explored why it makes sense to rationally plan the economy. But what's interesting is capitalism is in such a dire state, it's crumbling through the hands of the capitalists that even a lot of them acknowledge that we need to regulate it in some way, and have things like wealth tax. But the thing is that they want to keep the system of exploitation alive. We want to end this system of exploitation because there's no such thing as ethical capitalism. and we can do a lot better than this. So, in order to control and plan our destiny, first we need ownership. Then we can democratically decide how production works, what jobs are needed, the quality of work, etc. And things like AI and automation, which are currently the enemy of the working class and present a dystopian future to us, that's what it represents. This kind of technology instead will represent a utopian future for us because it will be part of our emancipation. And things like open source will become completely normal. It doesn't make sense. Well, under capitalism, as is the case now, you've got 100 companies all producing the same goods and the same services and keeping all their research and data all secret. What makes sense is clearly to combine our efforts. And this is only possible for a planned economy. So, yeah, we've talked about the kind of economic changes and how it will affect us, but how it will truly affect us as individuals is really even harder to imagine because it will be truly profound. If any of you have ever studied uprisings and revolutions, often you hear these incredible first-hand accounts of people who were always quite reserved suddenly being emboldened and impassioned, in a state of ecstasy because they genuinely have a say over their own lives, and we're all working towards that ends together. So yeah, this is absolutely possible that we can experience this, a society based upon solidarity where we're all in this together and all fighting towards a common end, all working together. And not only can we experience in this lifetime, but we must experience this in our lifetimes. And this is the goal.
Following on from what Sean was talking about, I wanted to talk about a bit of there's often a big question mark over what socialism would look like and how it would function. And when people often think about socialism because of their experiences of the Labour Party and other societies that have claimed to be socialist, they tend to think of state control. Sometimes they'll talk about the state controls everything, or owns everything, and so we talk about a big powerful state. And that's sort of equated with socialism. And that's the sort of propaganda that the right wing will often come out with. It's freedom under capitalism, or the state under socialism. But the aim of socialism, as well as the abolition of the class system, is also the abolition of the state system, the state as well. The state in and of itself is a tool of oppression for ruling class, whoever that ruling class is. So historically, under feudalism, the state was in the control of the aristocracy. In our society, it's under the control of the capitalists, of big business, the bankers, the industrialists, and so forth. So the state, when it's really boiled down, the state obviously has a myriad of functions, but its main and really only purpose, when you come down to it, is a tool of oppression for the ruling class. So it's the ruling class's armed wing. It's the army, the police, prisons, and so forth. And historically, when the working class has taken power in the past, whether it's in the Paris Commune, 1871, Russia, 1917, it's wielded power to defeat the previous ruling class with the aim of dissolving it completely. So by taking control of the means of production, the factories, the workplaces, and so forth, it takes away the basis for the capitalists' power, which is private property, and works towards the abolition of private property and the abolition of all classes as a whole. Without property, class ceases to have much meaning. And once that system's abolished, the need for a state to enforce it, that armed wing that I just talked about, is no longer there. That doesn't mean that the tools for sort of mass organization of the economy, whether it's industry, healthcare, local government, the things we often assume we refer to when we talk about sort of like the state's functions, justice systems and so forth, would disappear completely. But they wouldn't be organised from above by the holders of state power. They'd be organised and run collectively. And Sean's illustrated, I think, quite well what that would look like. So when the working class has seized power in the past. It set up mass democratic institutions that run these things. Again, whether it's healthcare, whether it's running the economy, the workplace, and so forth. And those have shown in embryo quite often what we could envisage socialist society looking like. So in Russia in 1917, you have mass meetings of workers' councils running factories, um, and mass meetings of the Soviets coming together to discuss vote on all manner of political questions. We saw similar attempts in Germany around the same time. And in Spain in 1936, when the working class rose up to resist fascism, they would set up sort of like what factory councils based on the workers and their own mass democratic institutions. At other times, they've been organised in different ways. The Paris Commune was run basically running the whole city through its local government, but again through mass workers' participation. All these sort of like revolutionary systems have been distinct in the high level of democracy and mass participation. They haven't been sort of, the sort of state bureaucrats running things. They've all involved, ordinary people getting together and deciding how things should be run. If they did elect officials, they'd often have instant recall of them. Those officials would often be there on a temporary basis, and people would take turns. You see all manner of very interesting sort of participatory systems develop when the working class actually try and wield power. So I suppose what I'm trying to illustrate is that the movement for socialism is often painted as like an oppressive state system, or in the sort of Labour Party variety of it's just a nice state governing in the interests of the workers. But socialism in its most radical and real sense is one of sort of mass democracy and participation, along with radical egalitarianism as well. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Actually, I think I've spoken to time, so I think I've covered everything I need to. So yeah, thank you very much.